Morning children. Now the chapter we are doing is solids, liquids and gases, right? So from this chapter today we are going to discuss separation of solids from separation of liquids and solids. Okay, so like how do you separate? Now what you have already learned in the previous class is there are two types of substances. One is soluble and the other one is insoluble, right? Soluble substances which can easily get dissolved in a liquid, insoluble substances which cannot dissolve in a liquid. So today we are going to discuss the separation of these soluble substances from a liquid and separation of insoluble substance also from a liquid. So the first one we are going to discuss separation of soluble substances. So how can you separate the solutions where the solute and the solvent? Now you know what is solute and what is solvent. When solute and solvent, when they get mixed, they will form a solution. So from the solution, how are you going to separate the soluble substances from a liquid? So to separate the soluble substances from the liquid, actually there are two methods. One method is boiling and the other method is distillation. Boiling and distillation, these are the two methods which will separate soluble substances from a liquid. Okay, so let's discuss the first process, boiling. So what happens in boiling? In the process of boiling, what you need to do is you need to heat the solution. Okay, so after you heat the solution, what will happen? The liquid will evaporate, leaving the solid particles behind. So let's take the example of sugar solutions. Now in sugar solutions, sugar is a solute, then water is a solvent. So sugar can easily get dissolved in water. So how can you separate this soluble substance, this sugar, from a water? What you need to do is boil. Boil the sugar solution. So when you boil the sugar solution, then what happens? The water will evaporate, leaving the sugar particles behind. So in that way, by the process of boiling, you can separate soluble substances. You can separate sugar and water. Is that clear? Then the next method is distillation. Distillation is also the method with the help of which you can separate soluble substances. So actually what is distillation? The process of purifying liquid by boiling and condensing into water vapor is called distillation. So in the process of distillation, there are two methods get involved, or two stages gets involved. The first stage is, first you have to do boiling. You have to do the boiling process. Then the second stage which takes place in distillation, in the method of distillation, is condensation. So these are the two process, these are the two method which you have to do in the process of distillation when you have to separate soluble substances. So you know what is boiling, so and what is condensation. Condensation is the process where the water vapor will change back into liquid state. That is called condensation. Okay, so let's see the process of distillation. Now in the process of distillation, you need some apparatus. Okay, apparatus means some vessels which you can see in the lab actually. So I have done a drawing of some apparatus just to make you understand. So this is called the round bottom flask. Okay, and first you have to keep impure water in round bottom flask. Impure water means the solution. So this is the impure water. So what you have to do, the round bottom flask which contains this impure water, you have to boil it. Heat this water. So when you heat this impure water, what will happen to the water? That water will change into water vapor. water vapor, leaving the impurities which are present in this water behind. Then this water vapor will pass through the tube and it will pass to the condenser. Now this apparatus here, it is called a condenser. In this apparatus, this water vapor, once they enter this condenser, this water vapor on cooling will change into water vapor. So this water vapor, when they pass through the condenser, they will change into water vapor on cooling, and that water vapor will be collected in another flask, another jar, and that flask contains pure water. So this is how the pure water will be separated from impure water by the process of distillation. Okay, so the pure water which you will collect by the process of distillation, this pure water is called distilled water. And if you see the uses of this distilled water is used to make medicines. It is also used in inverters, in batteries, etc. But this distilled water you cannot use for drinking purposes, because this distilled water does not contain the minerals which we need to have in our drinking water. So these are the two processes, boiling and distillation are the two processes of separation of soluble substances from a liquid. Is that clear? Now the second one is separation of insoluble substances from a liquid. Separation of insoluble substances from a liquid means, let me give you the example of sand and water, where sand is a solute, and when you add sand in water, which is a solvent, sand will not get dissolved in water. So that's why, how can you separate these insoluble substances from a liquid? That is the second method which we are going to discuss. So to separate the insoluble substances from a liquid, there are three methods. One is sedimentation, second one is decantation, and the third one is filtration. Now what is sedimentation? Now first you have to make a solution. So make a solution of sand and water, mix sand and water. So when you mix sand and water, what will happen to the sand? They will not dissolve in water, but what happens to them? They will settle down at the bottom of the bottle or at the bottom of the container. And that process is called sedimentation. So let me show you the process of sedimentation. What I have done here is a bottle. I have mixed sand, alright, sand and water. Now sand is a solute, water is a solvent, and sand is insoluble substances. So when you add sand and water, that sand will settle down at the bottom of the container. So the process of settling down of insoluble particles at the bottom of the container, this process is called sedimentation. So this is the first stage. Then after this sand particles or after the insoluble substances settle down at the bottom of the container, then you will follow the next step. And the next step is decantation. Decantation. Now what is decantation? Now in the process of decantation, the clear liquid which you can see out here, this clear liquid you have to pour it in another glass without disturbing these sand particles. Is that clear? So what is decantation? The pouring of the clear liquid into another vessel without disturbing the sand particles, or without disturbing the insoluble particles, are called decantation. So what will you do? I'm going to do it out here. I'm going to pour the water out here without disturbing the sand, and this is decantation. So see, I'm pouring the water out here. Slowly, very slowly, without disturbing the sand particles which are insoluble. Now you can see it out here. I have separated the insoluble substances from the liquid, and this process of pouring of clear liquid into the next container is called decantation. So this is the process of sedimentation of decantation, with the help of which we can separate the insoluble substances from the liquid. Is that clear? Now the next method is filtration. Now what is filtration? Now filtration, it is the process. Filtration is also the process of separation of insoluble solid particles from a liquid. Okay. So in the process of filtration, how do we do? The process with the help of which the insoluble particles are separated from a liquid by using a filter is called filtration. So what is the process on filtration? You have to allow, the mixture will be allowed to pass through the filtrate. Okay, and what happens with the pore? Filter must have some little pores, some pores. So when you allow the mixture to pass through the filter, then what happens? The liquid can easily pass through the pores, leaving behind the solid particles. So that is how the insoluble particles can separate from the liquid. And the most common example of filtration is making of tea, which you can practice at home, which you can do at home. Is that clear? So these are the different process of separation of insoluble substances from water or from liquid. So children, in my next class, I will be doing miscible and immiscible liquids. So thank you children.